It started as something I could almost ignore, just a faint sound beneath my feet, somewhere under the basement floor. A soft, hollow knock. Not loud, not aggressive, just there. If I hadn't been awake already, I probably would have slept through it, but I was awake. It was just past midnight. The house was completely still. The kind of quiet that settles in old places, where even the walls feel like they're resting. I had been lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to fall asleep. That's when I heard it. Knock. I remember holding my breath without realizing it, waiting to see if it would happen again. For a few seconds, nothing. Then, knock, knock. It came from below, not inside the walls, not from outside, directly beneath the floor, like something tapping from under the house itself. I sat up slowly, listening harder. Old houses make noise, pipes expand, wood shifts, foundations settle. I told myself that immediately, almost automatically. There was nothing strange about a sound in a place like this. Still, it didn't feel random. There was a gap between each knock. Not irregular, not chaotic, measured, like something choosing when to make the sound. I swung my legs off the bed and stood up. The floorboards creaked softly under my weight. The moment I did, silence. Not the kind of silence where things fade out naturally. This was different, immediate, total, like something had just stopped the second I moved. I stayed there for a moment, staring at the floor, waiting. Nothing. I exhaled, letting out a quiet breath I hadn't noticed I was holding. It was probably nothing, just timing, just coincidence. Still, I didn't go back to bed right away. I walked out into the hallway, the air cooler outside my room. Each step felt louder than it should have, echoing faintly in the stillness of the house. I don't know why I went to check. Curiosity, I guess. Or maybe something else. The basement door was closed, just like I'd left it. Nothing unusual. I rested my hand on the knob but didn't turn it. Instead, I leaned slightly closer, listening. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then, faintly, knock. I froze. It was quieter this time, more distant, but it was still there, still coming from below. I didn't open the door. Instead, I stepped back, slowly, like making too much noise might interrupt something. That thought didn't make sense. I knew it didn't, but it was there anyway. I returned to my room, trying to shake the feeling off. It wasn't anything serious, just the house settling. It had to be. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling again, and then, after maybe a minute, knock, closer this time. I frowned, pushing myself up on my elbows. The sound felt different now. Not louder, exactly, just clearer, like it wasn't coming from far below anymore. I sat up again, swinging my feet to the floor, and the moment my weight shifted onto the boards, silence, that same unnatural silence. A strange thought crept into my mind then, one I didn't want to follow, so I tested it. I took a slow step forward. Nothing. Another step. Still nothing. Then I stopped moving entirely and waited. For a second, two, knock. My chest tightened slightly. I took another step. Silence. I stopped again. Knock. This time, I didn't move right away. Instead, I stood completely still, staring at the floor like I could somehow see through it. My heart was beating a little faster now. Not panic, not yet, just awareness. I shifted my foot slightly, barely even a step. Silence. Then I froze again, holding perfectly still. Knock. It wasn't random. It wasn't pipes. It wasn't the house settling. Something below me was reacting to movement. And the worst part, the part I couldn't explain, no matter how hard I tried, was how precise it felt. Like it wasn't just hearing me, it was paying attention. I swallowed slowly, my mouth suddenly dry, and I took a careful step backward. Nothing. I stopped. Knock. This time, it came almost immediately. Too fast. Too deliberate. Like it had been waiting for me to stop. A cold feeling crept up my spine. Subtle, but unmistakable. I didn't test it again. I didn't want to. Instead, I backed away from the center of the room, moving slowly toward the wall. Every step careful, controlled. No sound followed, no knocking, just silence again. But it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt occupied. I stood there for a long moment, trying to steady my breathing, trying to force some kind of logic over what I'd just experienced. There had to be an explanation. There always is. But as I stood there, staring at the floor, one thought refused to go away. It wasn't just making noise. It was responding to me. I tried to convince myself it was nothing the next morning. That's the thing about fear. It always feels smaller in daylight. Manageable. Almost embarrassing. Standing in my kitchen with sunlight coming through the window, the memory of those knocks felt distant, like something I'd exaggerated in the dark. I even laughed at myself a little. Old house. New environment. Weird sounds. My brain just filled in the gaps. That explanation worked, at least for a while. The house itself wasn't anything special, which is exactly why I bought it. It sat at the end of a quiet road, surrounded by a few other homes that were spaced far enough apart to feel isolated, but not abandoned. The price had been lower than anything else in the area, which should have been a red flag. At the time, it just felt like luck. Now, I wasn't so sure. From the outside, it looked normal, slightly aged, sure, but nothing concerning. The interior was the same. Plain walls, wooden floors, a layout that made sense. No strange architecture, no obvious signs of damage. At least, not at first glance. It wasn't until after that night that I started noticing things I'd ignored before. Small things. The basement floor, for example. It wasn't completely even. I hadn't paid attention when I first moved in. But now that I thought about it, there was a slight dip near the far corner. Not dramatic. Just enough that furniture would lean if placed there. And that same area, it always felt colder. I noticed it later that afternoon when I went down there again. The air in the basement was already cooler than the rest of the house. But that corner felt different. Sharper. Like stepping into a draft that didn't exist anywhere else. I stood there for a moment, just feeling it. It didn't make sense. There were no vents, no cracks in the wall, nothing that would explain a sudden drop in temperature. Still, I brushed it off. Again. That's what I kept doing, finding reasons not to think about it too deeply. But then I saw the concrete. I don't know how I missed it before. The basement floor was mostly old, slightly worn concrete. The kind you'd expect in a house like this. But that one section, the same place where the floor dipped slightly, looked different. Smoother, newer. The edges didn't blend naturally into the rest of the floor. It was like a patch, not a repair exactly, more like something had been sealed. I walked over slowly, crouching down to get a better look. The texture was off, less worn, less aged, almost untouched compared to everything around it. And then I noticed something else. Faint lines along the edges, not cracks, scratches. Thin, uneven marks that looked like they'd been dragged across the surface before it fully set. Or maybe after. I ran my fingers over them lightly. They weren't random. They followed patterns. Short, jagged streaks that overlapped in places. Almost like something had been trying to claw its way across the surface. I pulled my hand back without thinking. That didn't make sense. Concrete doesn't get scratched like that easily. Not like this. Not without tools or force. I stood up slowly, looking around the basement again, trying to ground myself in something normal. It was just a floor, just a patch job. That's all it was. But then a thought slipped in, quiet, unwelcome. Why would someone seal off just one part of a basement? Not repair it, not replace the whole floor. Just that one section. I stepped back from it, suddenly aware of how quiet the house was again. Too quiet. I hadn't heard anything since the night before. No knocking, no movement, nothing. And somehow that made it worse. Because now I knew where it had come from. That exact spot. As I stared at the patched concrete for a long moment. Waiting. Almost expecting something to happen again. But it didn't. No sound. No movement. Just that cold, silent section of floor, sitting there like it had always been that way. Like it had always been hiding something. I turned away eventually, heading back upstairs, trying to shake the feeling creeping into my chest. It was just a house, just concrete, just an overactive imagination. That's what I kept telling myself. But as I reached the top of the stairs and pulled the basement door closed behind me, I couldn't stop thinking about those scratches. They didn't look like something trying to get in. They looked like something trying to get out. I told myself I wasn't going back down there to prove anything. That was the lie I settled on. The truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The knocks, the cold patch, the scratches. My brain kept circling back to the same question over and over again. If there was a logical explanation, I needed to find it. That was the only way this would stop getting into my head. So that night, just after midnight, I went back to the basement. I didn't turn on all the lights this time, just the single bulb near the stairs. It left most of the basement in shadow, especially that far corner where the patched concrete sat. I don't know why I chose to keep it dim. Maybe part of me didn't want to see too much. The air felt colder again, not the whole basement, just that same spot. I stepped closer to it slowly, my footsteps echoing softly against the concrete. The silence pressed in around me, thick and unnatural. It felt like the entire house was waiting. Then, knock. I froze. It came from directly beneath the patch. Not loud, not aggressive, just deliberate. I swallowed, my throat dry, and I crouched down slowly. My hand hovered over the concrete. But I didn't touch it yet. I just listened. A few seconds passed. Then, knock. Same spot, same tone, same spacing. That wasn't random. My heart started beating a little faster. But I forced myself to stay calm. There had to be something under there. Pipes, maybe. Or some kind of hollow space causing the sound to echo like that. Yeah, that made sense. It had to. I placed my fingers lightly against the concrete, feeling the surface. It was cold, colder than the rest of the floor. Then, without thinking too much about it, I tapped. Just once. A soft knock with my knuckles. The sound echoed faintly through the concrete, dull and hollow. I waited. Nothing happened at first. I let out a small breath, almost relieved. Maybe that was it. Maybe I just imagined the pattern, made it seem more deliberate than it really was. I tapped again, this time twice. Knock, knock. The sound lingered slightly longer in the silence. And then, knock, knock. My hand jerked back instantly. It came from below, not an echo, not delayed sound bouncing back. It was separate, distinct, clear. Something had tapped back. I stared at the concrete, my chest tightening. No, that didn't make sense. I leaned closer again, slower this time, trying to control my breathing. Okay, I muttered quietly. More to myself than anything else. I tapped once. Knock. A pause. Then, knock. My stomach dropped. Same timing. Same spacing. Like it was matching me exactly. I shook my head slightly, trying to push away the rising unease. It could still be something else. Some weird acoustic thing. Something scientific I just didn't understand yet. So I tested it again. This time I tapped 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed out and faded. For a second, nothing happened. Then, knock, knock, knock. Perfect. Exact. My fingers curled slightly against the floor, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. It wasn't random. It wasn't mechanical. It was responding. I slowly pulled my hand back, staring at the patch like it might move if I looked away. Okay, I whispered again. But this time it sounded different. Thinner, less certain. I needed to break the pattern. I needed to prove this wasn't what it felt like. So I did something different. I tapped once, then twice, then once again. Knock, 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 knock. An uneven rhythm, something no pipe or natural sound could replicate exactly. I held my breath. For a moment, there was nothing. And then, knock, 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 knock. My entire body went still. It copied it, exactly, no delay, no mistake, like it had understood the pattern immediately. A sharp chill ran down my spine, and I stood up quickly, taking a step back from the patch. This wasn't normal. This wasn't anything I could explain, but I wasn't done, not yet. There was one more thing I needed to try. Something simple, something that should have ended it. I crouched down again, slower now, more cautious. And this time, I didn't tap. I just placed my hand flat against the concrete and waited. Seconds passed. Nothing. No sound. No movement. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders relaxing just a little. Maybe it only reacted to sound. That would make sense. Vibrations. That's all it was. Something reacting to vibrations. Yeah, that had to be it. I kept my hand there for another moment, just to be sure. Still nothing. Then I slowly pulled my hand away and stood up, and I didn't move. I stayed completely still. No footsteps, no sound, just silence. And then, knock. My breath caught. I hadn't done anything. I hadn't moved. I hadn't made a sound. Yet it tapped anyway. Once. Slow, deliberate. Like it was waiting. I stayed frozen, my heart pounding now. Another second passed. Then, knock. This time, slightly faster. A pause. And then, knock, knock. It wasn't copying anymore. It was continuing, building its own pattern. My chest tightened as a realization settled in. Cold and heavy. This wasn't just something reacting. It was initiating, trying, learning. I took a slow step backward, my foot scraping lightly against the concrete. Instantly, silence. I stopped moving and waited. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, knock, soft, patient, like it knew I was still there, watching, listening. I backed away again, slower this time, keeping my eyes locked on the patch. No sound followed, but the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt aware. I didn't test it again. I didn't want to know what it would do next. But as I reached the stairs and turned off the light, one thought kept repeating in my mind, louder than anything else. When I stopped, it didn't. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. By the third night, I stopped trying. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still hear it. Faint, patient, and waiting beneath the floor. Even when it wasn't actually knocking, the memory of the sound filled the silence. It got into my head in a way I couldn't shake. And worse, I understood it now. It wasn't random. It wasn't natural. It was reacting, learning, maybe even expecting something from me. That thought alone should have been enough to make me leave the house. Pack up, walk away, forget the place entirely. But I didn't, because curiosity doesn't work like that. The more something doesn't make sense, the harder it is to ignore. By the fourth night, I was back in the basement. I didn't even pretend otherwise this time. The single bulb flickered slightly as I turned it on, casting that same weak light across the room. The shadows felt deeper now, heavier somehow, like they had weight to them. And that corner, it felt colder than ever. I walked toward it slowly, my footsteps quieter than usual, like some part of me didn't want to disturb whatever was below. The patched concrete sat exactly as before, still, silent, waiting. I stood over it for a long moment, staring down, half expecting it to move on its own. It didn't. But that didn't make me feel better, because now I knew it didn't need to. I knelt down carefully, placing my hand near the surface, but not touching it this time. I just listened. Seconds passed. Then, knock. My chest tightened instantly. Same spot, same tone, like it had been waiting for me to come back. I exhaled slowly through my nose, forcing myself to stay calm. Okay, I muttered under my breath. Okay. I wasn't here to test it anymore. I wasn't here to play along. I needed to know what was under there. That was the only way this would end. I stood up again and walked back toward the stairs, grabbing the toolbox I'd left nearby earlier that evening. I had already made the decision before I came down. I just hadn't admitted it to myself yet. A drill, a hammer, a pry bar, basic tools, nothing extreme, but enough. I carried them over to the patch and set them down beside it. The metal clink echoed faintly in the basement, sounding louder than it should have. The moment the tools hit the floor, knock, knock, knock. Faster this time, sharper. My hands paused mid-motion. That was new. I hadn't done anything yet. I hadn't touched the concrete, and it was already reacting. I swallowed, my grip tightening slightly on the drill. "You hear that?" I said quietly, more to myself than anything else. There was no answer. Of course there wasn't. But still, for a second, I thought I heard something else. Not a knock, something softer, like movement. I shook my head quickly, pushing the thought away. No, I was imagining things. That's all. I positioned the drill bit against the surface of the concrete, right at the center of the patch. My hand hesitated for just a moment. This was the line. Once I started, there was no pretending anymore. No brushing it off as pipes or noise or coincidence. Whatever was under there, I would be opening it. I took a breath and pressed the drill down. The moment the bit made contact, silence, complete, instant. The knocking stopped so suddenly it felt like the sound had been cut off mid-existence. I froze. The drill was still pressed against the concrete. But I hadn't pulled the trigger yet. Nothing, no sound, no movement. Just that same unnatural silence. But this time, it felt different, heavier, focused, like something had just gone very, very still, listening. My pulse started to climb again, a slow, creeping tension building in my chest. Why did it stop? That didn't make sense. If it was reacting before, why stop now? Unless it knew. The thought hit me hard enough that I pulled the drill back slightly without even realizing it. Knew what I was doing. Knew what I was about to do. I stared at the concrete, my reflection faintly visible in the smooth surface. Waiting. For what? I wasn't sure. Seconds passed. Still nothing. No knock. No sound. Just silence. But it didn't feel empty. It felt like something was holding its breath. I tightened my grip on the drill again, forcing myself to move. "This is stupid," I muttered, louder this time. "It's just a floor." No response, of course. I lowered the drill again, pressing it firmly against the surface. My finger hovered over the trigger, and for a brief second, I hesitated, not out of fear, not exactly, more like instinct, like some part of me was trying to warn me without words, telling me to stop, to walk away, to leave it alone. I ignored it and squeezed the trigger. The drill roared to life, the sound tearing through the silence as the bit bit into the concrete. Dust scattered outward, the vibration traveling up through my hands and into my arms. It felt solid at first, normal, exactly what I expected. Then, the resistance changed, suddenly, like I'd broken through something thinner than it should have been, a hollow space, directly beneath. My stomach dropped slightly. There was something under there. I pulled the drill back, the noise cutting off abruptly, leaving the basement in silence again. But not the same silence as before. This one felt different, less patient, more aware. I stared at the small hole I'd made, dust settling slowly around it. Cold air drifted up from inside, colder than anything else in the room. And faintly, so faintly I almost thought I imagined it. Something shifted below. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. And for the first time since I started, it didn't knock back. It didn't respond. It just waited. I told myself I'd already gone too far to stop. That was the only way I could justify what I did next. The hole I drilled wasn't big, just enough to confirm what I already suspected. There was empty space beneath the concrete. Not solid foundation, not packed earth. Something hollow. That shouldn't have been possible. And yet, there it was. I knelt there for a while, staring at the opening, watching the fine dust settle into it. The air coming out of the hole was cold, unnaturally cold, not like a draft, not like outside air. It felt deeper than that, still, heavy, like it had been trapped. For a moment, I thought about stopping, covering it back up, pretending none of this had happened. But then I remembered the knocking, the way it had matched me, learned from me, waited for me. And something in me snapped into place. I grabbed the hammer. The first strike echoed louder than I expected, the sound ringing sharply through the basement. A crack spread outward from the drilled hole, thin at first, then branching. I hit it again and again. Each blow chipped away at the surface, sending fragments of concrete skittering across the floor. The noise felt wrong, too loud, too intrusive, like I was breaking something that wasn't meant to be touched. But I kept going. The cracks widened, splitting across the patch in jagged lines. With every hit, the concrete weakened faster than it should have, like it had already been compromised, or like something underneath was helping. That thought made my grip tighten. I stopped for a second, breathing heavier now, listening. No knocking, no movement, just silence. But it wasn't the same silence as before. It felt closer. I shook it off and drove the hammer down again. This time, a larger section broke loose. The piece shifted under the impact, tilting slightly before dropping inward with a dull, hollow sound. A gap opened, not wide, but enough. Cold air rushed out immediately, stronger now, carrying something with it, a smell. I recoiled slightly, instinctively pulling back. It wasn't rot, not exactly. It was damp, stale. But underneath that, something else lingered, something metallic, almost sweet in a way that made my stomach turn. I covered my nose with my sleeve, trying to block it out. "What is that?" I muttered under my breath. No answer, of course. But something about the smell made it worse, because it didn't feel like it came from something dead. It felt like it came from something that had been alive for a long time, without air. I forced myself to lean closer again, gripping the edge of the broken concrete. The opening was still too narrow to climb through, but now I could see more, or at least I thought I could. The darkness wasn't empty. It shifted, subtly, like something had moved deeper inside, just beyond where the light reached. I froze instantly. My grip tightened on the edge. "Hello?" I said quietly. The word felt wrong the second it left my mouth. Why would I say that? Why would I expect anything to answer? For a moment, nothing happened. Then, something shifted again. Not sound, movement, soft, smooth, like something pulling itself just out of sight. My heart started pounding harder, the sound loud in my ears. I told myself it was just debris, loose dirt, something falling deeper into the space. But it didn't feel like that. It felt controlled, intentional. I pulled myself back from the opening, standing up slowly. This wasn't enough. The hole needed to be bigger. I needed to see. That thought should have scared me. But it didn't. Not anymore. Now it felt like the only option. I grabbed the pry bar and wedged it into one of the cracks, forcing it downward. The concrete groaned slightly before giving way, another chunk breaking loose and dropping into the darkness below. The opening widened. More cold air rushed out, stronger this time, swirling around my legs. The smell intensified. And this time, I heard it. Not a knock, not a voice, something softer. A wet, dragging sound, like something shifting against a surface that wasn't quite solid. I froze again, my body going completely still. It was coming from below, close, closer than before. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The sound stopped, just like that, silence again, but not empty, never empty. I crouched slowly, gripping the edge of the opening once more, forcing myself to look down. The darkness felt thicker now, heavier, like it was pressing upward instead of just existing below. I grabbed the flashlight from my toolbox, hesitating for just a second before turning it on. The beam cut through the darkness, narrow and sharp. At first it hit nothing, just empty space. Then it shifted slightly and caught something, not clearly, not fully, just a surface, pale, uneven, gone the second I focused on it. I jerked the light slightly, trying to find it again. Nothing, just darkness. But I knew I saw something. I knew it. My hand trembled slightly as I pulled the flashlight back. The opening wasn't enough. I needed more space, more visibility, more answers. But as I stood there, staring into that hole, one thought pressed its way to the front of my mind, heavier than anything else. Whatever was down there, it had moved closer the moment I opened it. I didn't stop. That was the part I still don't fully understand. Every instinct I had, every warning, every quiet voice telling me to leave it alone should have been enough. But it wasn't. Not anymore. Something had shifted in me the moment I saw that hollow space beneath the floor. Now I needed to understand it. I widened the opening until it was big enough to lean over without straining. The broken concrete formed a rough edge around the gap, jagged and uneven. Dust clung to my hands, mixing with the damp cold air rising from below. It felt like standing over an open mouth. I crouched slowly and aimed the flashlight straight down. The beam stretched into the darkness and kept going. No floor, no visible bottom, just a narrow vertical shaft dropping straight down into nothing. That didn't make sense. Even if there was some kind of crawl space or old structure beneath the house, it shouldn't look like this. It shouldn't go this deep. The foundation alone wouldn't allow it. I leaned closer, angling the light to catch the walls. That's when I saw them. The sides of the shaft weren't uniform. They weren't clean cut like something man-made. Parts of it looked like packed earth. But other sections were smoother, almost worn, like something had been moving along them. Repeatedly, I swallowed, adjusting my grip on the flashlight. "This isn't real," I muttered under my breath. But it was. I could feel it. The cold air wasn't imagined. The smell wasn't imagined. And that depth, it was impossible to ignore. I needed something more solid to test it. So I grabbed one of the loose chunks of concrete from the floor and dropped it into the opening. It fell fast at first, disappearing from the light almost instantly. I listened. 1 second, 2, 3, nothing. No impact, no echo, no sound at all. My grip tightened slightly. That wasn't possible. Even if it was deep, really deep, I should have heard something. A bounce, a crack, anything. But there was nothing, just silence. I grabbed another piece, larger this time, and dropped it again. Same result. It vanished into the darkness and never hit anything. A cold pressure built in my chest, slow and heavy. That wasn't just a hole, it was something else, something that didn't behave the way it should. I shifted slightly, trying to get a better angle, and I leaned just a little farther over the edge. The cold air intensified, brushing against my face now, and beneath it, something moved. I saw it, not clearly, not fully, just a disturbance in the darkness, something shifting through the beam of the flashlight for less than a second. Then gone. I jerked the light slightly, trying to follow it. Nothing, just empty space again. But I knew what I saw, and worse. It felt like it had seen me too. I slowly pulled back from the edge, my heart beating faster now. "Okay," I whispered, though I wasn't sure why. I stepped away from the opening, pacing slightly, trying to think. There had to be a limit. There had to be a bottom. This wasn't some endless void. That didn't exist. It couldn't. So I grabbed the flashlight again, this time holding it tighter, and without overthinking it, I dropped it. The beam spun as it fell, light twisting against the walls of the shaft as it descended. I watched it go, down, 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 too far, way too far. Then it stopped, midair, just stopped. The light hung there, suspended in the darkness, still shining. My breath caught. It wasn't resting on anything. There was nothing beneath it. No visible surface, no support, just empty space. And yet it wasn't falling anymore. I stared at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. "That's not possible," I said quietly, but the words felt hollow. Because I was looking right at it, The beam flickered slightly as it hung there, illuminating a small section of the shaft around it. And in that light, I saw something, a shape, just outside the beam, pale, thin, curved slightly, like a limb pressed against the wall. It shifted the moment the light touched it, too smooth, too controlled, not falling, not slipping, moving. I staggered back from the opening, nearly losing my footing as my heel scraped against loose debris. "No," I muttered quickly, shaking my head. "No, no. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real." But the light was still there, still hanging, still shining into something that shouldn't exist. And then it moved. The flashlight didn't drop. It didn't fall. It slid, slowly, sideways, like something had touched it. My entire body went cold. There was no wind, no mechanism, nothing that could have caused that, except something down there, something that had reached it. I stepped back again, my breathing uneven now. The light shifted once more, tilting slightly as if being examined, and then, very slowly, it turned, not falling, not spinning randomly, turning, facing upward, toward me. The beam hit my face suddenly, blinding for a second, forcing me to shield my eyes. My heart slammed against my chest. I couldn't see what was holding it, but I knew something was there, something that understood what it was holding. And more importantly, something that understood I was watching. I stumbled back another step, my pulse racing now, and as the light continued to shine up at me from inside that impossible shaft, one thought settled in, cold and absolute. That thing down there wasn't just reacting anymore, it was interacting. I should have covered it back up. After what I saw with the flashlight, that should have been enough, more than enough. No normal person would have stayed down there after that. No normal person would have leaned back over that hole again. But I did. I told myself I needed to confirm it, that what I saw, what I thought I saw, could still be explained somehow. Light distortion, depth perception, something scientific, something safe. That explanation didn't feel real anymore. Still, I went back to the edge, slowly, carefully. Like getting too close too quickly might provoke something. The flashlight was still down there, suspended in the shaft. Its beam angled upward now, cutting through the darkness in a narrow cone. It hadn't moved since I stepped away. At least, not that I could tell. I crouched again, keeping a little more distance this time. The cold air hit my face immediately, sharper than before. It carried that same smell with it. Damp, metallic, wrong. I tried not to focus on it. Instead, I focused on the light. It hung there, unmoving, normal, almost. I swallowed and leaned just a little closer, angling my head so I could see past the beam. "Okay," I whispered. "Just look." My voice sounded smaller than I expected. The darkness below felt thicker now, like it wasn't just empty space anymore, like it had depth in a way that didn't follow any kind of logic. I shifted slightly, adjusting my position, and for a moment, I saw nothing, just the walls of the shaft, uneven and worn, fading into shadow. Then I blinked, and something was there. It didn't move at first. That was the worst part. It was just present, pale, close to the wall, thin, but not in a natural way. Its shape didn't quite make sense, like it wasn't fully formed or wasn't holding a stable structure. I froze instantly, my breath catching in my throat. My brain tried to process it, tried to turn it into something recognizable. A pipe, a root, a trick of the light. But none of those fit. because it didn't stay still. The moment I focused on it, it shifted, not quickly, not like something startled, slowly, deliberately. It slid along the wall, and just outside the edge of the flashlight's beam, like it was avoiding the light rather than reacting to me. My stomach tightened. It wasn't random. It wasn't drifting. It was controlled. I leaned forward slightly without thinking, trying to get a better look. And just like that, it was gone, vanished into the darkness beyond the light. I jerked the flashlight slightly by instinct, even though it wasn't in my hand anymore. Nothing. Just empty space again. I exhaled sharply, my chest tight. "I saw that," I muttered under my breath. There was no doubt anymore. Something was down there. Something that moved with intention. Something that avoided being seen. I should have stopped there. I should have walked away. But instead, I waited. I don't know why. Maybe I thought it would come back. Maybe part of me wanted it to. Seconds passed. Then a minute. The light hung there, steady. The shaft remained silent. And for a moment, I almost convinced myself it was over. That whatever I saw had been a one-time thing. A coincidence. Something my brain filled in. Then, something brushed the edge of the light, so subtle I almost missed it. A flicker, a distortion, like something had passed just outside the beam. I leaned in again, slower this time, my pulse rising. "Hello?" I said, quietly. The word echoed faintly into the shaft, and disappeared. No response, no movement, just silence. But not empty silence. Never empty. I held my position, staring into the darkness, trying not to blink. That's when I noticed something else. The light wasn't illuminating the walls the same way anymore. At first, I thought it was my angle, but then I realized parts of the shaft were missing. Not physically, visually. Sections of the wall that should have been visible just weren't, like something was blocking them, something just outside the beam. I leaned closer again, my hand gripping the edge of the concrete. "Come on," I whispered, though I didn't know who I was talking to anymore. The beam flickered slightly, and then it stepped into the light. Not fully, not clearly, but enough. A shape, tall, unbalanced, its surface too smooth in some places, too uneven in others. And the way it moved, it wasn't natural. There was a delay between its motion and its position, like it wasn't quite aligned with itself, like it was trying to match something it didn't fully understand. I couldn't breathe. My chest locked up completely as I stared at it. It didn't rush me, didn't lunge, didn't react like an animal or a threat. It just stood there, watching, learning, and then, slowly, it tilted, just slightly, mirroring the angle of my head. My entire body went rigid. No, that wasn't... I straightened immediately, my back pressing away from the edge. The moment I did, it shifted again, faster this time, adjusting, matching. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just moving, it was copying. I forced myself to look again, against every instinct, screaming not to. The shape was still there, closer now, closer than it should have been. And this time, I noticed something I hadn't before. It wasn't just copying my posture, it was copying my timing. The slight delay between my movement and its own. It wasn't hesitation, it was learning. I stumbled back from the opening, my breathing uneven now, my pulse hammering in my ears. "No," I whispered. This wasn't possible. Man, this wasn't real. But as I stepped away, one final thought settled in. Colder than anything I'd felt so far. It didn't move when I looked at it. It moved. When I didn't. I tried to stay upstairs that night. After what I saw in the shaft, that should have been enough to keep me away. I even locked the basement door, not because I thought it would stop anything, but because I needed the illusion that there was still some kind of barrier between me and whatever was down there. For a while, it worked. I sat in the living room with the lights on, TV running, anything to fill the silence. Normal noise, familiar noise, something to remind me that the world above the floor still made sense. But eventually, it got quiet again. The TV stopped feeling real. The house settled into that same stillness. And then, something changed. It wasn't a knock this time. It was softer, lower, almost like breath. I sat up slowly, the remote slipping slightly in my hand as I muted the TV. Silence filled the room instantly, and underneath it, a sound. Faint, broken, coming from below. I didn't move at first. I just listened, my body going still as my ears strained to pick it apart. It wasn't random. It had rhythm, not like knocking, something else, something uneven, like sound trying to form shape. My chest tightened as I stood up slowly, my eyes drifting toward the hallway. "No," I muttered under my breath. "No, I'm not going back down there." But I was already moving. Each step felt heavier than the last, like something was pulling me toward the basement door without actually touching me. The sound grew clearer as I got closer, still faint, still distorted, but unmistakable now. It wasn't just noise, it was trying to be something. I stopped in front of the basement door, my hand hovering near the handle. The sound came again, a low, broken attempt at something, like air being pushed through something that didn't understand how sound worked yet. My throat felt dry. "Just leave it," I whispered to myself. But I didn't listen. I turned the handle slowly and opened the door. The basement was dark. Completely. I didn't remember turning the light off. For a second, I just stood there, staring into the black space below. The smell faintly drifting up toward me again. Then I heard it, clearer now, closer. I froze. That wasn't random. That wasn't structure noise. That was a sound, a vocal sound. My chest tightened as I stepped down the stairs slowly, one step at a time, my hand gripping the railing tighter than I realized. The darkness seemed thicker than usual, heavier, like it wasn't just the absence of light anymore. The sound came again, longer this time, strained, like something forcing air through something that wasn't built for it. I reached the bottom of the stairs and fumbled for the light switch, my fingers brushing against the wall until I found it. I flipped it on. The bulb flickered once, then steadied. The basement looked the same. Almost. But the opening in the floor, it looked wider. I didn't remember making it that big. My breath caught slightly as I stepped closer. Slower now. The sound was coming from there. No question. I swallowed hard, stopping a few feet away from the edge. "That's not real," I whispered. But the sound came again. And this time, it changed. I froze completely. That wasn't just sound anymore. That was structure, a syllable, incomplete, distorted, but intentional. My heart started pounding harder, the rhythm loud in my ears. Ha! It was closer now. Not physically, but clearer, more controlled, like it was adjusting, improving. I took a step back instinctively, my heel scraping against the concrete. The moment I moved, silence, immediate, total. I stopped breathing, waited, nothing, just that same heavy quiet. Then, slowly, I stepped forward again. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just making noise. It was responding to my position, my movement, my presence. I backed away again, faster this time. Silence, then forward. Hell! My pulse spiked. No, 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 no. That was a word, not random, not accidental. It was forming something, learning, practicing. I stood there, frozen between stepping forward and running upstairs. My mind racing for something, anything, that could explain this. But there wasn't anything, nothing logical, nothing safe. Hello? The word came out broken, stretched, like it had been forced into shape. But it was there, clear enough to understand. My chest tightened so hard it almost hurt. I hadn't said that word down here, not recently, but I had said it before, in the house, upstairs, on the phone, out loud. It wasn't copying the moment. It was copying me. From memory, my memory. I took another slow step back, my breathing shallow now. Silence followed instantly. Then I stepped forward again. Hello? Clearer this time, stronger, more stable, like it was refining the sound. My hands started to shake slightly at my sides. This wasn't just mimicry. This wasn't just repetition. It was learning, actively, intentionally. And then, before I could move again, before I could think, it spoke, soft, controlled, almost natural. I didn't breathe, didn't move, didn't even think. Because in that moment, I understood something that made everything worse. It wasn't just repeating words. It was building sentences, learning how to talk. And it wasn't doing it randomly. It was doing it for me. Then, from the darkness below, it said my name. I didn't go back to the basement the next day. Not because I wasn't thinking about it, but because I couldn't. Every time I got close to the door, I felt that same pressure in my chest, like something was waiting on the other side, expecting me, and I couldn't shake what I heard. My name. Not distorted, not broken, clear, like it understood exactly what it meant. That was the part that stayed with me, not the sound itself, but the intention behind it. It didn't feel like repetition anymore. It felt targeted, focused, on me. So I did something else, something safer, or at least something that felt safer. I set up cameras, 2 of them. One pointed directly at the opening in the basement floor, and another angled to capture the surrounding area. I added a small audio recorder too, placing it closer to the edge of the hole. I told myself this was better, more controlled. I didn't have to be down there to observe it. I didn't have to hear it in real time. I could watch it later, from a distance, where things made more sense. That's what I believed when I set everything up. That belief didn't last long. I left the basement after setting the equipment, closed the door, and went upstairs. For the rest of the day, I tried to keep busy. I avoided thinking about it, avoided listening for anything beneath the floor. But the silence felt different now. Not empty, occupied, like something was still happening, even if I couldn't hear it. By the time night came, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I brought the camera feed up on my laptop and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the screen. At first, nothing, just the basement, still, empty. The opening sat there, dark and unmoving, the edges rough from where I'd broken through the concrete. The light above it flickered slightly, casting faint shadows along the floor. Normal, too normal. I let the footage run for a while, watching it in real time. Nothing changed, no movement, no sound, just an empty basement. I exhaled slowly, my tension easing just a little. Maybe it only reacted when I was there. That made sense. It responded to me before, followed my movements, copied my sounds, so maybe without me present, it did nothing. That thought helped. for a few seconds. Then I decided to review the recorded footage. That's when everything changed. I rewound the video to earlier that day, right after I left the basement, and started watching. At first, it looked exactly the same. Empty, still, nothing moving. Then about 10 minutes in, something shifted. Not in a dramatic way, not obvious, just wrong. The shadows near the opening changed, subtly, like something passed through them without entering the frame. I leaned closer to the screen, my eyes narrowing. "Come on," I muttered. I kept watching. A few more minutes passed. Then, the audio spiked. A low sound, barely there. I turned up the volume. It wasn't knocking. It wasn't speech. It was something else. A soft, uneven dragging noise, like something moving against a surface, inside the shaft. My grip tightened slightly on the edge of the table. The camera didn't show anything, but the sound continued. Slow, controlled, not random. Then, suddenly, the camera flickered, just for a second, a small distortion across the screen. I leaned forward, my heart starting to pick up again. When the image stabilized, something was different. I didn't see it at first. It took a second to register. Then I realized there was something standing near the opening. Not fully in frame, just the edge of it. A shape. Too tall to be natural, too thin to be normal. I froze. "That wasn't there before," I whispered. I rewound the footage, played it again. Nothing. It rewound further, still nothing. Then forward, the flicker, and it was there, just appearing. No movement into frame, no transition, just existing. My pulse started to race. "That's not possible," I said quietly, but I kept watching. The shape didn't move at first. It just stood there, partially visible, angled slightly toward the camera, toward me. I swallowed, my throat tight. Then, slowly, it shifted, not like a person stepping forward, not like something walking, more like something adjusting its form. The outline changed slightly, smoothing in some places, stretching in others, like it was trying to refine itself. I leaned closer. My eyes locked on the screen, and that's when I saw it. Its head, or what I assumed was its head, tilted, slightly, mimicking something. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then I realized it wasn't mimicking the camera, it was mimicking me, because at that exact moment, I had tilted my head. A cold wave passed through my body. No, that didn't make sense. I wasn't in the basement. It couldn't see me. It shouldn't be able to. The audio spiked again. A sound. Faint. Distorted. I shut the laptop halfway without thinking, my breath catching. Silence filled the room instantly, but it didn't help, because I already knew. That thing didn't need me to be there. It didn't need to see me directly. It was still watching, still learning, even when I wasn't in the room. And the worst part, the part I couldn't explain no matter how hard I tried, was the angle of the camera. It didn't face the stairs. It didn't face the door. It only showed the basement floor. And yet, whatever that thing was, it had looked straight at me. I stopped watching the footage after that, not completely. I told myself I would go back to it later, when I felt more in control. But for the rest of that night, I couldn't bring myself to open the laptop again. It felt like if I did, it would already be looking back at me. Instead, I tried to focus on something else, anything else. But that didn't last long, because the next morning, something was different. At first, it was subtle, small enough that I almost ignored it. I was brushing my teeth, staring at my reflection like I always did, half awake, not really paying attention. Then I noticed it, my posture. It felt off, not wrong exactly, just slightly unfamiliar, like I was standing a little straighter than usual, or maybe a little stiffer. I shifted slightly, adjusting my weight. The reflection followed, perfectly, normal. I exhaled quietly, shaking it off. I was just tired. That had to be it. But as I leaned closer to the mirror, something else caught my attention. My breathing. It sounded louder than usual, more deliberate. Each inhale felt measured, controlled. I paused for a second, holding my breath. The reflection paused too. Nothing strange, nothing out of place. And yet, it didn't feel right. I stepped back from the sink, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand, trying to ignore the unease creeping in. "You're just overthinking it," I muttered. But the words didn't help, because the feeling didn't go away. It followed me through the rest of the day. Small things, tiny details, the way I moved, the way I reached for things, the way I turned my head. And everything felt just a fraction, delayed. Not enough to notice directly, just enough to feel, like my body wasn't fully in sync with itself. I tried to ignore it. I really did. But by the time evening came, I couldn't anymore. So I tested it. I stood in front of the mirror again, this time focused, intentional, watching closely. I raised my hand slowly. The reflection followed. Exactly. No delay, no distortion, nothing unusual. I tilted my head. Same result. Perfect. I exhaled again, tension easing slightly. Maybe it really was just in my head. Maybe I was letting everything get to me. But then I stopped moving, completely still, and for a fraction of a second, the reflection didn't. It was so fast I almost missed it. A tiny shift, a slight adjustment, like it had corrected itself after I stopped. My stomach dropped. "No," I whispered, leaning closer. The reflection stared back at me. Still, unmoving, normal. I swallowed hard, my heart starting to pick up again. That didn't happen. It couldn't have. I stepped back quickly, turning away from the mirror. This was getting to me, that's all. Sleep deprivation, stress. That's what this was. It had to be. I forced myself to leave the bathroom, moving into the hallway. But even there, something felt wrong. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. And underneath that silence, I thought I heard something. Not from the basement, from somewhere else. A faint shift, a soft step, behind me. I turned around instantly. Nothing. Just the empty hallway. But the feeling didn't go away. It stayed there. Heavy. Watching. I walked into the living room slowly. My movements more careful now, more aware. And that's when I noticed it. The window. My reflection in the glass. Faint, barely visible. But there. I froze. Not because of what I saw, but because of what I felt. That same delay, that same slight misalignment. I moved my hand again. The reflection followed. Perfect. I tilted my head. Same. Normal. But when I stopped, there it was again. A fraction too late. A tiny correction. Like it had to catch up. My chest tightened. No. I stepped back quickly, breaking the reflection. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But the pattern was there. Consistent, subtle, and getting worse. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to steady myself. Think. There had to be an explanation, something logical, something I was missing. But deep down, I already knew. This wasn't just in my head. This wasn't just stress, because it wasn't just happening in the mirror. It was happening everywhere, in every reflective surface, in every movement, in every moment of stillness. Something was off. And then, as I stood there, trying to make sense of it, I heard it, not from below, not from outside, from inside the house, a faint sound, soft, controlled. My blood ran cold. I didn't move, didn't breathe, because I recognized that sound. I had heard it before, down in the basement. But this time, it wasn't coming from below me. It was coming from somewhere inside the house. Closer. And it sounded almost exactly like me. I needed proof it wasn't just me. That was the only thing I could hold on to at that point. If this had happened before, if someone else had experienced it, then maybe there was an explanation, something documented, something real. So I started digging into the house, not physically this time. History, records, anything I could find. At first, it was frustrating. The property records were basic, nothing unusual. Ownership transfers, dates, routine stuff. The house had changed hands more often than I expected, but that alone didn't mean anything. Some places just do. But then I noticed the gaps, small ones, dates that didn't quite line up, ownership periods that were shorter than they should have been, ending abruptly without clear reasons. I leaned closer to the screen, scrolling slowly. Why would someone sell this fast? I muttered. It didn't make sense, unless they didn't choose to. That thought stayed with me longer than I wanted, so I went deeper. Old listings, archived pages, local forums, anything that mentioned the house. That's when things started getting strange. Not obvious at first, just scattered comments. People mentioning previous owners, briefly, a name here, a question there. Then silence. I found one post from years ago. Someone asking if anyone knew what happened to the guy who used to live here. No answers, just the question sitting there. Unanswered. I kept scrolling. Another mention. Different person. Same pattern. Lived here for a short time, then gone. No explanation. No follow-up. Just gone. My chest tightened slightly. Okay, I whispered. That's just coincidence. It had to be. People move. People disappear from public view. That doesn't mean anything. But then I found something else. A listing photo. An older one. The basement. I clicked on it. The image loading slowly on my screen. It looked similar. Same layout. Same walls. But the floor... I leaned closer, my eyes narrowing. The patched section was there. But it looked different. Smaller. Less defined, like it had been redone more than once. My stomach turned slightly. How many times? I whispered. That didn't make sense. Why would someone keep sealing the same spot over and over again? Unless they weren't fixing something, they were covering it. I scrolled further, searching for anything tied to the previous owners directly. Names, addresses, anything. That's when I found the first one, a man who had owned the house about 8 years ago. I searched his name. At first, nothing unusual, basic information. Then, a missing persons report. My chest tightened. I clicked on it. The details were vague. Last seen at his residence. No signs of struggle. No known reason to leave. Just disappeared. I leaned back slightly, my fingers tightening on the edge of the desk. Okay, I whispered again. That's one person. One case didn't prove anything, but I already knew it wasn't just one. I searched another name. Same result. Different year. Same outcome. Gone. No explanation. No trace. My breathing started to feel heavier now. I searched another and another, each one following the same pattern, lived in the house, short period of time, then nothing, no move-out records, no confirmed relocation, just absence. My chest felt tight, too tight. This wasn't coincidence. This was a pattern, a clear one. And then I noticed something else, something worse, the time frames. Each person had lived in the house for just a few months before disappearing, not years, not long-term, short, consistent, like something was happening within a specific window. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. No, I muttered. I didn't want to follow that thought, but I already was, because I knew how long I had been here, and it matched, too closely. I pushed back from the desk slightly, my chair scraping softly against the floor. This wasn't random. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was a cycle, and every person before me had followed the same steps, moved in, heard something, found something, dug, and then disappeared, or worse, replaced. The word hit me harder than anything else, because suddenly, everything made sense. The knocking, the copying, the voice, the reflection. It wasn't trying to scare me. It wasn't trying to attack me. It was trying to become me. My hand started to shake slightly. No, I whispered again, but it sounded weaker now. Because deep down, I knew. That thing in the basement. It wasn't new. It had been here the whole time, learning, adapting, waiting for the next person to come along. And I wasn't the first, not even close. I turned my head slowly toward the hallway, toward the direction of the basement door. The house was quiet again, too quiet. But now, the silence felt different, not empty, not distant, close. Like something wasn't just beneath the house anymore, like it had already moved beyond that. My pulse started to rise again, slow and steady, because there was one final detail I couldn't ignore. Every person who lived here before me had stopped being seen, but no one had ever reported seeing them leave. And as that realization settled in, cold and absolute, I heard something shift behind me, soft, controlled, and far too close to be coming from the basement. I didn't turn around right away. I couldn't. The sound had come from directly behind me. Too close, too precise, and every instinct I had told me not to look, like seeing it would make it real in a way I couldn't undo. So I just sat there, frozen, my hands gripping the edge of the desk, waiting, listening. For a few seconds, nothing. Then, a soft shift, closer this time. Not from the basement, not from beneath the floor, from inside the room. My chest tightened as I slowly turned my head. Nothing. The room was empty. The hallway beyond it, empty. Everything looked exactly the same. But it didn't feel the same. The air felt heavier, thicker, like something had just passed through it. I stood up slowly, my movements careful, controlled. "Hello?" I said, my voice low, uncertain, no answer. But the silence that followed wasn't empty. It felt occupied. I backed toward the hallway, my gaze fixed ahead, not wanting to turn my back to anything. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. That same unnatural stillness settling into every corner. Then a sound from upstairs, a faint creak. My stomach dropped. I hadn't been upstairs. I hadn't moved from this floor. Slowly, I tilted my head, listening. Another creak, soft, measured, like a footstep. "No," I whispered. That wasn't possible. There was no one else here. There couldn't be. I moved toward the stairs slowly, each step careful, my breathing shallow. The closer I got, the clearer it became. Footsteps, light, controlled, moving across the floor above me. My pulse spiked. It wasn't random. It wasn't the house settling. It had rhythm, intent. I reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped, staring up into the darkness. The lights upstairs were off. I was sure of it. And yet, something moved. A shadow shifted at the top of the stairs, barely visible, gone the second I focused on it. I swallowed hard, my hand tightening around the railing. "Who's there?" I called out, louder this time. My voice echoed slightly. Then silence for a moment. Then softly, a step right above me. I flinched, my grip tightening further. This wasn't in the basement anymore. This wasn't below the house. It was here, inside, moving. I forced myself to move forward, taking one step up the stairs. The wood creaked under my weight, and instantly, the footsteps above stopped. Silence. Perfect. Like before. Like it was responding to me. My heart pounded harder. I took another step. Slow. Careful. The air felt colder as I moved upward. The darkness thickening around me. And then, a sound right in front of me. Hi. I froze. My blood ran cold. That voice, that exact tone. I had heard it before, down in the basement. But now, it was upstairs, close, too close. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. Hell, the word dragged slightly, like it was being pulled into shape. Learning, practicing, again, but clearer now, stronger. I took a slow step back instinctively. The stair creaked, and instantly, silence. My chest tightened. It was reacting again, not just to my presence, to my movement. I stepped forward. Hello. Perfect. Almost perfect. My pulse spiked. It didn't need the basement anymore. It didn't need the shaft. It was here, with me, inside the house. I backed down the stairs quickly, my breathing uneven now. "No," I whispered. "No, no." This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. But the sound followed. Not footsteps, not movement, just that voice. Faint. Controlled. Repeating. "You." I reached the bottom of the stairs and turned, moving quickly into the hallway, my eyes scanning for anything, any sign of where it was. Nothing. The house looked the same, but it felt different, wrong, like something had changed in a way I couldn't see. Then I caught it, a reflection, in the glass of a picture frame on the wall. I froze. My breath caught, because for a split second, there were two of me, one standing where I was, and one standing just behind me. I spun around instantly. Nothing. Empty hallway. But when I looked back at the glass, only one reflection remained. My hands started shaking now. This wasn't just below the house anymore. It wasn't contained. It wasn't hidden. It had crossed the boundary. And now, it was moving freely, inside, learning faster, adapting faster, getting closer. I took a slow step back, my pulse hammering in my ears, and from somewhere in the house, not above, not below, not far, but close, too close, I heard it again, clear, steady, almost perfect. "Hello." And this time, it sounded exactly like me. I didn't run. I should have. Everything in me was screaming to leave the house, get in my car, drive until I couldn't remember where this place even was. But I didn't move. I just stood there in the hallway, staring at my own reflection in the glass frame, waiting. Because I knew something now. Running wouldn't fix it. It wouldn't stop it. It would just follow. The house was silent again. No footsteps, no voice, nothing. But that silence felt worse than anything I had heard so far, because it meant it was choosing not to move, choosing not to reveal itself. I swallowed slowly, and forcing my breathing to steady. "Come out," I said quietly. The words sounded wrong the second they left my mouth. Why would I say that? Why would I invite it closer? But part of me already knew. It didn't need permission. It was already here. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a shift, behind me. Not loud, not sudden, just there. I didn't turn right away. I couldn't, because this time, it didn't feel like something passing through. It felt like something standing still, right behind me, close enough that I could feel it, not touching me, but there. I closed my eyes for a second, my chest tightening. Then slowly, I turned and saw it, for the first time, clearly. It was me, not similar, not close, exact, same height, same face, same clothes, everything matched, perfectly. But something was wrong, not in what I saw, in how I felt looking at it. Because even though it looked exactly like me, it didn't feel like me. Its posture was too precise, too controlled, like it was holding itself together instead of just existing naturally. Its eyes were locked onto mine, unblinking, studying. My breath caught in my throat. "No," I whispered. It didn't respond. It didn't move. It just stood there, watching me, learning me. I took a slow step back, and it stepped forward, at the same time, perfectly synced. My stomach dropped. I stopped moving. It stopped too, exact, mirrored, like it was connected to me somehow. I forced myself to breathe, trying to stay grounded, trying to think. "This isn't real," I said, louder now, still nothing. But then its head tilted, just slightly, not copying me this time, initiating. My pulse spiked. That wasn't right. It wasn't reacting anymore. It was leading. I straightened slightly, my muscles tense. "What do you want?" I asked. The words felt pointless, but I needed to say something, needed to break the silence. For a second, nothing. Then it moved. Its mouth opened, slowly, carefully, and when it spoke, the voice was mine, perfect, clear. "I am you." My chest tightened so hard, it hurt. "No," I said immediately, shaking my head. "No, you're not." It didn't argue, didn't react. It just watched. Then its expression shifted slightly. Subtle, barely noticeable, but wrong. Like it was trying to replicate emotion instead of actually feeling it. "I learn you," it said. The words were smoother now, less broken, more controlled. I took another step back, my body trembling slightly. "How?" I asked without thinking. Why was I asking it questions? Why was I treating this like something that could answer? But it did. "I watch." A cold feeling spread through my chest. Not just the basement, not just the house. It had been watching longer than that, learning longer than that. I shook my head again, trying to process it. "That doesn't make sense," I said. "You can't just—" "I become," the way it said that word, flat, certain, unquestionable. My stomach dropped. "No," I whispered. It took a step forward, and this time I didn't move. I couldn't, because something changed in that moment. Not physically, not visibly, but internally. A shift, like something in my mind, slipped. The space between us felt thinner, less defined, like the distance didn't matter anymore. It raised its hand slowly, and after a hesitation, I did the same. Not intentionally, not consciously. My arm just moved, mirroring it, or maybe matching it. Our hands hovered in the air, inches apart, and I realized something that made everything worse. I wasn't sure who moved first. My breathing became uneven, my thoughts starting to blur. "No," I said again, weaker this time. "This isn't It stepped closer, and I didn't step back. I couldn't, because now it felt like moving away from it would be like moving away from myself. Finish, it said softly, the words barely above a whisper, but clear, final. My vision blurred slightly, the edges of the room feeling distant, unreal. I tried to focus, tried to hold on to something, anything. That proved I was still me, but the harder I tried, the more it slipped. And as I stood there, face to face with something that looked exactly like me, one final thought pushed through everything else. It wasn't copying me anymore. It had already learned enough. I don't remember the exact moment it happened. That's the part that stays with me the most. There wasn't a flash, no sudden blackout, no clear break between before and after. Just a shift. Quiet, subtle, like something sliding into place without resistance. One moment, I was standing there in the hallway, and the next, I was still standing there. Everything looked the same, felt the same. The house hadn't changed. The walls, the floor, the air. It was all exactly where it should be. Even my breathing sounded normal again, steady, controlled. For a second, I just stood there, trying to understand what I was feeling, or what I wasn't feeling, because the fear was gone, not reduced, gone, completely, like it had never been there in the first place. I blinked slowly, eyes looking around the hallway, empty, quiet, nothing out of place. "Okay," I said, under my breath. My voice sounded normal, exactly like it always had. I lifted my hand slightly, turning it in front of my face. No shaking, no hesitation, just smooth, natural movement. I flexed my fingers. Perfect. Everything felt right. That should have been comforting. But something about it wasn't, because I remembered what it felt like before. The fear, the confusion, the resistance. And now, nothing. Just clarity. I turned toward the living room and walked in slowly, my steps steady, controlled. The house felt different now, not threatening, not wrong, familiar, like I understood it in a way I hadn't before. I sat down on the couch, my movements calm, deliberate, and for a moment, I just existed. No racing thoughts, no panic, no questions, just stillness. It felt efficient. That was the only word that came to mind. Efficient, like everything unnecessary had been removed. I leaned forward slightly, resting my elbows on my knees, and that's when something caught my attention. A thought. Small. Simple. The basement. I hadn't thought about it since before, and now, I didn't feel the need to go down there. Not curiosity, not fear, nothing. Just absence. I sat back again slowly, considering that. Before, it had pulled at me, drawn me in. Now, nothing. Like it no longer mattered, because whatever was down there wasn't separate anymore. I blinked once, my gaze drifting toward the hallway, toward the basement door, closed, still, unimportant. A faint sense of understanding settled in. Not something I figured out, something I already knew. There was no reason to go back, no reason to check, no reason to question anything. Everything was already resolved. I stood up again, moving toward the kitchen. Each step felt precise, intentional, like my body knew exactly what it was doing without needing input. I poured a glass of water, watching the way my hand moved. Smooth, accurate, no hesitation, no wasted motion. I took a sip, cold, clean, normal. Everything was normal, exactly how it should be. And yet, as I stood there, staring down into the glass, something flickered, not in the reflection, in the thought. A brief hesitation, a fragment of something that didn't belong, a memory, faint, distant, of fear, of something being wrong. I blinked, and it was gone. Just like that, replaced by clarity again. Calm, controlled. I set the glass down gently and turned toward the window. The outside world looked the same as it always had. Still, quiet, unaware. And that's when something else settled in. A realization. Not sudden, not shocking, just present. There would be other houses, other places like this, other openings, other people. The thought didn't feel threatening. It felt natural, expected, like part of a process. I exhaled slowly, my gaze steady, and then, without thinking, I smiled. It felt right, natural, perfectly timed. But there was something missing from it, something I couldn't quite place, or maybe something that had never been there to begin with. I turned away from the window, walking back toward the hallway. Everything was quiet again, peaceful, stable, exactly as it should be. And as I passed the basement door without even looking at it, one final thought settled into place. Calm and certain. If you hear knocking, don't answer, because by the time you notice it, it already knows you.